The Beasts of Noah. The beast stones at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey are some of the most mysterious, unexplainable objects ever found. Göbekli Tepe itself is considered to be the oldest temple in the world. It's at least 12,000 years old. The beast stones appear to be proof that Noah's Ark is 100% real. Göbekli Tepe contains a lot of different stones. The ancient temple is dotted with rock pillars that are decorated in strange zoomorphic pictures. There are images of birds, insects, and everything else you would expect to find in a zoo. Researcher Andrew Collins believes the images of animals etched into the stones were meant to immortalize the truth of Noah and his ark. The mysteries of Göbekli Tepe are huge and very controversial. Some scholars believe it to be the true site of the Garden of Eden, the actual place where Adam and Eve lived. If true, it would make sense to find stone images of Noah's animals here. Another interesting fact is that just a few hundred miles to the south is Mount Ararat, the very place where Noah's Ark came to rest after the flood. And here's another mystery. It's been suggested that certain species of animal depicted in the beast stones of Göbekli Tepe could not have been found in the region. They would have been from very far away, which indicates they were brought to the same place for a mysterious purpose. Could it be that Noah truly did build a boat and fill it with exotic animals before a flood? And could Göbekli Tepe's stones be the only surviving testament of the human world before that flood? What do you think? The ancient prosthetic. In Germany, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a metal prosthetic hand. It was found still attached to the horribly decayed corpse of somebody who lived centuries ago. The prosthetic hand is bizarre, but not as weird as the whole story. The discovery was made totally by accident. Some pipeline workers uncovered a grave near the St. George Parish Church in the Bavarian town of Freising. Archaeologists were called in to investigate. They soon identified the skeletal remains as belonging to a man who died between the ages of 30 and 50. He passed away around 1450 AD, though perhaps as late as 1620. But this was no ordinary guy. Archaeologists were at a loss for words when their eyes fell upon an incredible artifact. The metal prosthetic was still attached to the skeleton's arm. They detached it and took it back to the laboratory, where they found it was made from iron and metal. It turned out the dead man had lost his fingers and tried to replace them with a hugely complex contraption. The prosthetic replaced 4 fingers. Luckily, his thumb was still intact. Each finger was formed individually from sheet metal. Researcher Walter Ehrlinger said scans showed the prosthetic had bits of fabric and leather stuck to it. The contraption had likely been covered with a leather glove and strapped to the man's hand with leather straps. The prosthetic arm is very cool, but not entirely unusual for its time. There was extreme military activity in Germany during the 15th and 16th centuries. A lot of people were being amputated, which led to the rapid development of prosthetic technology. This is one example of medieval doctors trying to restore a man's missing digits. And now for number 6, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to James Rosario, hope you have a great day at work, and Bruce McDonald, who is a long-term subscriber. We wouldn't be here without you guys. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about unexplained artifacts. The Star Map. A hugely controversial artifact was discovered inside the ancient Sumerian ruins of Nineveh. It's a star map from 5,500 years ago that appears to show a cosmic impact event. For the last 150 years, scientists have been trying to solve the mystery of this extraordinary map. Let me start with its discovery. In the late 19th century, archaeologists dug the map out of the Nineveh ruins. It was found underground in the collapsed library of King Ashurbanipal. The library was a truly fantastic repository of early knowledge, dating to roughly 650 BC. The map, which is etched onto a circular clay tablet, dates back even further. Computer analysis has shown the markings on the map match perfectly with what the sky looked like above Mesopotamia in 3100 BC. Scholars believe the map is the earliest astronomical instrument ever discovered. However, it is damaged. The reverse side of the tablet is blank, and only about 40% of the front image is left. The relic is currently being stored in the collection at the British Museum. Even though it hasn't been decoded, it's still proof of seriously sophisticated astronomical technology. One of the primary theories is that the tablet was made to record the impact of an asteroid that hit Austria. In 3123 BC, a massive piece of debris from outer space smashed into Europe. It's believed this clay tablet was made by a Sumerian astronomer on the night of the impact. The astronomer had more than likely made hundreds of similar tablets while watching the sky every night. Computer simulations have shown the Austrian asteroid most likely came from the same region of space depicted on the star chart. The Witch of Saratoga. In England's Northamptonshire, construction workers discovered a witch bottle in an old chimney. What makes this witch bottle so exciting is that it was found in the birthplace of one of America's most notorious witches. A witch bottle, if you haven't heard of them before, was used to keep witches away from homes and businesses. They were typically stuffed into a chimney or buried under the floor to prevent witches from wreaking havoc. This particular witch bottle was uncovered in a private home within the village of Watford. The building has a long and rich history. It was once an old pub, though now it's undergoing renovations to become more modern. As the original chimney was being destroyed, a glass torpedo bottle was recovered. The glass was dated to the 19th century. Inside were fish hooks, murky liquid, and human teeth. The owner of the home, and therefore the owner of the witch bottle, has chosen to remain anonymous. They don't want people to know their house had such creepy stuff in it, but they did want the bottle donated to the academic community. Researchers at the Museum of London Archaeology were given the artifact. They confirmed that it is indeed a witch bottle. It was likely used to break an evil spell cast by a local witch, or to trap one. People in the 19th century would fill bottles with items they believed to have magical potency, items like pins or hooks, and almost always human urine. English folklore said witches were drawn to urine. The idea behind the bottle was that a witch be lured into the glass by the urine, then trapped on the hooks or pins inside. But was this a real thing? Did witches really terrorize English villages to such an extent that people came up with defensive traps for them? That's a question that nobody can answer. Maybe there was magic in the world, though science certainly says there wasn't. What I can tell you is that the old pub where the witch bottle was found happens to be the birthplace of Angeline Tubbs, aka the Witch of Saratoga. The owner may have wanted to remain anonymous, but the news came out anyway. Angeline was born in this very building in 1761. She emigrated to the Americas and became famous as a fortune teller, but she was also rumored to be a practitioner of black magic. Her soul is said to still haunt her old neighborhood in New York State. It's unclear if the witch bottle had anything to do with Angeline. Experts think it was made 70 years after she was born. Maybe the owners of the pub/house were trying to get rid of her lingering evil. The statue that changed history. One of the most fantastic Egyptian artifacts was discovered in 1884. Egyptologist William Matthew Flinders Petrie excavated the Temple of Tanis, uncovering fragments of a true colossus. It was a stone statue of Ramses II, regarded as the most powerful leader of the Egyptian New Kingdom. He was the greatest ruler of the greatest Egyptian dynasty ever. Over 100 years passed after that discovery, and nobody thought anything like it would be found again. Then, in 2017, a team of researchers excavated an urban neighborhood in Cairo. They were interested in seeing what secrets might be buried underneath the modern streets. 3,000 years ago, this was where Ramses II lived. Lo and behold, after 5 long years, they found what they thought was a stone structure. Archaeologists revealed what looked like the floor or ceiling of a massive white building. But in reality, they were standing on the chest of a giant. What the team uncovered in 2017 is one of the most epic Egyptian statues ever pulled from the muck. It was a titan hewn from stone, a gigantic statue of who, at first, researchers assumed was Ramses II. But it wasn't. Alongside the statue, researchers identified hieroglyphs naming Pharaoh Psamtik I. Who was this guy? This discovery was not just amazing because of the statue, it also changed the understanding of ancient Egypt. Psamtik I ruled Egypt in 664 BC. Historians have always believed that Egypt was long past its glory days by then, but that's clearly not true. The discovery of such a monumental statue shows the pharaohs did have the money to build grandiose structures. Historians assumed kings were too broke in the later days of the kingdom to build things like pyramids and colossi, but obviously Psamtik was doing it. Archaeologists are now forced to reconsider what they know about the prosperity of ancient Egypt. There could be other marvels built by Egyptian pharaohs that nobody knows about, buried under thousands of years of history. Lord Nelson's missing jewel. There is a gem almost as iconic as the crown jewels, but it was stolen over 70 years ago and nobody knows where it is. During the days of the Ottoman Empire, the highest military decoration somebody could receive was a precious ornament called the çelenk. It was a truly magnificent jewel that was only given to the best of the best. One of these priceless, gem-studded artifacts was given to Horatio Nelson, also known as Lord Nelson. He was gifted the jewel after the Battle of the Nile in 1798. Ottoman Sultan Selim III was the one who gave the jewel to Nelson. He was the first non-Muslim to receive the honor. Nelson's victory against the French Republic was important enough to make him an exception. At the time, Nelson's çelenk was one of the most iconic jewels of the British Empire. It had 13 diamond springs, one for each French boat conquered in battle. Its plume boasted over 300 diamonds. The admiral wore it on his hat for the remainder of his life. He was so proud of the jewel that he added it to his family coat of arms. After Nelson died, the jewel passed down to his brother. Slowly but surely, it succumbed to age. Some of the decorative details were lost. In 1895, it was sold for less than $1,000. Then, in 1929, following a very loud appeal by the English, it was purchased by the Society for Nautical Research. It retired at the National Maritime Museum for the next 30 years. Then, in 1951, a real-life cat burglar stole it. Nobody has seen the jewel since. The details of what happened are very blurry. In the early morning hours of June 11th, a thief or thieves used a folding ladder to break into a window. They smashed the glass case containing the jewel and fled. The robbers were never caught. However, 30 years later, in the 1980s, notorious cat burglar George Taters Chatham claimed responsibility for the theft. He said he broke the priceless relic into pieces and sold the diamonds individually. It's unclear if he was responsible or just making up stories. To this day, no trace of Lord Nelson's special jewel has been found. If it were ever to be recovered, the relic could be worth millions and millions of dollars. The Lisu Sculpture. An artifact truly worthy of a main position in any museum was excavated from a dirt pit in Iraq in 2023. Archaeologists found a tremendously heavy limestone sculpture of a Lisu from nearly 3,000 years ago. But just what in the world is a Lisu? You're undoubtedly familiar with the Sphinx, a creature with the body of a lion and the head of a pharaoh. You might also be familiar with the griffin, a mythical beast with eagle wings, an eagle head, and a lion's body. Then there's the Persian manticore, another mythical creature with a scorpion tail, a body of a lion, porcupine quills, and a man's head. A Lisu is a lesser-known legendary monster with the head of a man, the body of a bull, and the wings of an eagle. It was a popular beast in Assyrian myth. The one just found in Iraq weighs over 18 tons. It's ridiculously big, though sadly it's missing its head. Archaeologists have dated the colossal structure to the days of King Sargon II, who ruled Assyria between 721 and 705 BC. To the Assyrians, Lisu represented intelligence, strength, and freedom. This one likely stood at the entrance of the ancient city of Dur-Sharrukin like a mighty guardian. Scientists still need more time to study it. Hopefully soon, they'll understand the true purpose of the mythical beast and what it meant to the kings of Assyria. The disappeared artifact. In 2020, a fascinating Roman artifact was discovered in Serbia. Within 24 hours, it was gone. Somebody stole it, and now it might never be seen again. The discovery was made during road construction leading to a landfill. One of the road workers came across an impressive stone slab with beautiful engravings in Latin. The road worker was kind enough to get a hold of the National Museum in Belgrade. An archaeologist from the museum traveled to the site the next day, but when they got there, the artifact was gone. Luckily, pictures were taken of the artifact before it was pillaged. 15 lines of Latin text tell the tale of a Roman official who died in the 2nd century AD. The artifact is gone, but the few lines of text still bring to life a man who led military detachments against the Dacians about 1,800 years ago. The slab was almost definitely part of a much larger monument commemorating the officer for his military successes. It's not common knowledge that the modern European nation of Serbia belonged to the Roman Empire for 600 years. They were initially under control of the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC. They remained a part of Rome until the empire collapsed and the Slavs arrived in the Balkans in the 6th century. This monument, now in the hands of a thief, could have added to the mysterious history of Serbia under Roman rule. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Giant stone balls. Almost 100 feet beneath a coal mine, 10 spheres were discovered about half the size of an ordinary person. Each one is about 3 feet in diameter, perfectly smooth, and may change color when it rains. The bizarre spheres were unearthed by an excavator at the coal mine in Russia, all lying close together. It was almost as if the mysterious balls of stone had been buried in prehistoric times, then discovered purely by accident. When the balls were first found, there were a lot of wild theories spinning around. Some thought they were dinosaur eggs. Some believed they were made by a lost civilization thousands or millions of years ago, and others believed they had been planted underground by aliens. But as it turns out, these stones are probably naturally formed, almost certainly from a process very similar to how pearls are made. According to Olga Yakunina from the Geology Museum of Central Siberia, these stone balls are really concretions. They formed in sedimentary rocks through the process of materials cementing around a nucleus. Something organic, like a leaf or an ancient tooth, started as the nucleus of the stone, and then, over millions of years, water flowing over the nucleus deposited minerals that all got glued together. This went on until the material was shaped into a gigantic ball of solid rock. In the end, it didn't turn out to be very mysterious at all. As for the fact that the balls change color after rain, experts say that's due to their iron oxide composition, turning them into rust. The tablets of Easter Island. The Rongo Rongo tablets of Easter Island have never been deciphered. The tablets were inscribed in the native language of the island's inhabitants over 1,000 years ago. Each mysterious tablet contains glyphs carved into the wood. Strange glyphs that don't appear to make any sense. They almost certainly tell a story, probably one of extreme importance, yet nobody can figure out what they say. The oral tradition of the island, legend passed down from generation to generation, tells of the king who arrived on Easter Island and had 67 wood tablets inscribed with all of the wisdom of his people. Everything from astronomy to how to sail the 7 seas, it was all written down on these tablets. And then the tablets were entrusted to the tribal leaders to keep them safe. The tribal leaders did just that, and many of the tablets have been preserved on the island ever since. There are currently 27 still surviving of the original 67, although many have been stolen, and are now scattered throughout the world in various museums. What's truly bizarre is that nowhere else in Polynesia has the Rongo Rongo script been found. The glyphs on the tablets are 100% unique to Easter Island. This has made them even more difficult to decipher and almost impossible to track their origin. As of right now, scientists are still baffled, and it doesn't look like the Rongo Rongo script will ever be deciphered. Mysterious ancient toys. Tel Jameh is an ancient Assyrian settlement in modern Israel that was inhabited 3,800 years ago. Over the past 2 decades, archaeologist Gus Van Beek has been excavating the site and recovering mysterious objects. These objects range from old coins to scarab amulets, scraps of pottery, and baffling ancient toys. One of the strangest collections of objects found consisted of 17 small discs, some made from chalk and others made from stone, with 2 holes drilled in the center. Similar objects have been found in Japan, Egypt, and even the Americas. 3 of them were found in New York City at the old site of a British Army camp. One of them was made from a coin, while others found across the world were made from stones 4,000 years ago. Scientists can't agree on what these mysterious artifacts were used for. Some say they were buttons, others say they were weights for looms, and others simply call them miscellaneous objects. But according to Gus Van Beek, they may have been children's toys. He thinks thread would have been strung through the holes and then stretched, allowing the discs to spin. They would have been pretty rudimentary toys, but may have made a kind of buzzing sound that ancient people found amusing. Yazd Atash Behram and the Eternal Flame. Yazd Atash Behram is one of the most mysterious temples in the entire world. It can be found in Yazd, Iran, and contains a magical treasure that's been around for 1,500 years. The temple was not dedicated to the Christian god, it wasn't made by Islamists, and it has nothing to do with the Jewish people. It's a Zoroastrian fire temple, the only one still standing outside of India. It contains a flame that has been burning since the year 470 AD. That was during the reign of the extremely powerful Sasanian Empire. The flame flickered to life inside the Pars Karyan fire temple, was relocated to the ancient city of Akta, where it continued burning for 700 years. Throughout the ages, as wars came and went, and civilizations rose and fell, the fire continued to be protected by the keepers of the Zoroastrian temples. It finally landed in its current home at Yazd Atash Behram in 1934. These days, the sacred flame is more of a tourist attraction than anything. It's burning inside an ancient bronze vessel and hidden on the other side of a glass wall. A person called a hirab has the important job of keeping the flame lit. Several times a day, the hirab must feed the flame dry wood to keep it alive. Only those who practice Zoroastrianism may witness the flame burning for themselves. Zoroastrianism is believed to be one of the earliest monotheistic faiths in the world, starting in Persia 4,000 years ago. It's older than Christianity by thousands of years and still practiced today. However, there are only between 100,000 and 200,000 worshippers across the world, mainly in Iran and India. The Tucson Artifacts. In 1924, a man named Charles Manier discovered 31 lead objects. They were found near Picture Rocks in Arizona and were initially believed to be relics from an ancient Mediterranean civilization. The artifacts were shaped to look like crosses, swords, and other religious objects. Some of them had Latin inscriptions, some had Hebrew, and one even had a portrait of a dinosaur on it. There were random Roman numerals engraved on the lead artifacts, and it was all very strange. To make things even more mysterious, Charles didn't find any other artifacts or signs of civilization. He found nothing except the lead objects. There was no hint that humans had ever lived in this dusty patch of Arizona. In the 1920s, the discovery of the Tucson artifacts was a revelation. The objects were believed to be proof that a Roman colony of Judeo-Christians had crossed the ocean and settled in Arizona around the year 790 AD. It was sensational. A man named Thomas Bent was so eager to discover more artifacts that he moved to the excavation site and built his house there to legally claim the property. But then came the bad news. Harvard University scholar George Valiant publicly denounced the artifacts as fake. So did Neil Judd from the National Museum at the Smithsonian Institution. Neil said the artifacts were created by an incompetent individual with a flair for Latin and a fascination with antiquity. These days, the artifacts are widely accepted as fakes. There probably was no Roman colony in Arizona. Nevertheless, there are believers who think the Smithsonian covered up the discovery so they wouldn't have to change the history books. The Glazel Artefacts. In Glazel, France in 1924, a cavern was discovered filled to the brim with artifacts. Oddly enough, this was the exact same year Charles Manier found the Tucson artifacts. It was a good year for archaeology and for mysterious potential forgeries. A farmer was plowing his fields in France when he came across the cavern. From within the dark and creepy space, he retrieved over 3,000 artifacts. It took 6 years to excavate them all, and much like the Tucson artifacts, they were greeted with great skepticism. Experts to this day debate the authenticity of the artifacts, and they've never been universally accepted or positively debunked. The thing about the artifacts in France is that they were found completely by accident by a 17-year-old farmer named Émile Fradin. In 1924, the 17-year-old farmer, who had to work 20 hours a day, didn't have time for cooking up schemes, never mind handcrafting archaeological forgeries. He discovered the underground chamber by accident and was shocked to see it filled with ceramic pieces of pots, human bones, and a tiled floor. In typical 1920s fashion, archaeologists went to the cave and ripped it up piece by piece. They took out the walls, the floor, and carried it all back to their museum labs. The artifacts were dated back to between 100 and 400 AD. Then, during excavations that followed, additional artifacts were found dating back to 10,200 BC. The discoveries became so controversial mainly because they were so strange. For example, there were weird tablets etched in indecipherable script and clay pots with inhuman faces on them. Some experts declared everything inside the cave real, while other experts said everything was fake. Nobody could agree on which artifacts were real and which artifacts were hoaxes. Adding to the mystery, there was a modern excavation in 1983, but the summary was never published. In 1995, more research was done, and the artifacts were dated back to the year 500. The cursed sapphire. The gem of sorrow, also known as the Delphi purple sapphire, is a mysterious haunted artifact which allegedly brings great misfortune to those who possess it. The stone was supposedly stolen by a British soldier during the mutiny of 1857 in Kanpur, India. During the fighting and the chaos, the soldier crept into the sacred temple of Indra, stole the gemstone that had been there for time unknown, and then fled. His name was Colonel W. Ferris, and he took the gigantic purple sapphire back home to England. Then came the troubles. He fell into financial ruin. Every member of his family came down with a mysterious illness, and his life was utterly ruined. Following the ruination of the colonel, the stone fell into the hands of Edward Heron Allen in 1890. Almost immediately after he came into possession of the gem, he became the victim of a series of strange and unfortunate events. In 1902, he gave the stone to a friend, and his luck changed. But his friend then fell into despair just like all the others. The pattern of misfortune continued until Heron Allen's daughter sent the gem to the Natural History Museum. It stayed there until 1972, hidden in a drawer, until curator Peter Tandy came across it. The gem came with a letter which said that whoever took possession of the stone should throw it into the sea. Ever since, the mysterious purple sapphire has been on display at London's Natural History Museum in their vault collection. The museum display seems to have finally broken the curse. The Garuda Bell. The Garuda Bell was found in 1944 by a young boy named Newton Anderson in West Virginia. According to legend, Newton found the mysterious bell inside a lump of coal. He dropped the coal, it broke, and he pried the treasure out from inside. It was like a chocolate egg with a prize in it. The bell is made of brass, about 7 inches tall, and it's mounted at its top by a figure of Garuda, a huge bird from Hindu mythology. But there are two things seriously wrong with the artifact. First of all, how an artifact from ancient India made its way into West Virginia is a little confusing. Second, the lump of coal was mined from a seam estimated to be 300 million years old. None of this makes any sense. Some believe the bell is a legitimate antediluvian artifact, something from a lost race of intelligent beings who lived on the planet millions of years ago. The Fisher Canyon Shoe Print. The Fisher Canyon shoe print was discovered in Nevada in 1917 by a miner named Albert Knapp. He brought it to the attention of his mining engineer, who couldn't believe what he was seeing. The print was solidified in a coal seam, a chunk of hard material dated to the Triassic period of between 252 and 201 million years ago. Somehow, a modern shoe made its imprint in a coal seam older than the dinosaurs. At least that's what it looked like to the miners. In truth, it really does look like a shoe print. There's no denying the uncanniness of the print. However, archaeologists and geologists alike were quick to dismiss the discovery. They said that all kinds of strange shapes can turn up in ironstone, including a shoe print. The lack of additional prints suggests it was nothing but a natural phenomenon and a really strange coincidence. Creating a forgery. Mysterious artifacts from the early 20th century turn up all the time, and scientists couldn't always explain them. But in the 21st century, scientists are pretty good at spotting forgeries from a mile away. When the archaeologist Eliseo Gil revealed a small trove of Roman artifacts, including a depiction of the crucifixion, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and one of the earliest uses of the Basque language, scientists were skeptical. Eliseo and two of his colleagues claimed to have found their artifacts in the Roman ruins of Iruna Velea. They also claimed the graffiti they found on an ancient piece of pottery was the earliest known picture of Jesus Christ being crucified. In February of 2020, these archaeologists found themselves in a criminal trial accused of forging the mysterious artifacts. After the relics were shown to the world, other archaeologists were quick to point out inconsistencies. The graffiti had been made using modern language, even commas and words from hundreds of years later. The wording was all wrong, sparking immediate concern. The archaeologists also forged hieroglyphics spelling out the name of Queen Nefertiti, who would have been unknown to the Basque people of Spain. A scientific commission ruled that 476 of the artifacts were either manipulated or simply not real at all. Eliseo and his colleagues were shunned by the archaeological community and disgraced. Scientists couldn't understand their discoveries because none of them had been real. Now the archaeologists are looking at upwards of 5 years in prison. Ramses II. In 2012 in Cairo, Egypt, local archaeologists and experts from Germany came across the remains of an ancient statue that they believed to be a depiction of one of the most famous rulers in history, Ramses II. It was discovered in what was once the ancient city of Heliopolis, the capital of worship for the Egyptian sun god Ra 3,000 years ago. Today, this place is a suburb in Egypt's modern capital. The statue has been hidden all this time beneath sand and rubble, never before seen by eyes in the modern world. Finding such a well-preserved artifact in a Cairo suburb in this day and age is basically impossible, which is what makes the discovery so fascinating. Plus, Ramses II is considered one of the greatest kings that ever ruled Egypt. He was in power for 66 years, which was unheard of in the ancient world. Normally, people didn't even live to be 60, and yet Ramses ruled longer than the average lifespan. He expanded the Egyptian empire all the way into Syria and Sudan. And he established borders with the neighboring Hittite Empire without spilling a drop of blood. It was a very rare event because royal reigns were nasty, animalistic, and short. And his face can be seen all across Egypt, depicted in the giant sculptures at Abu Simbel, at Ramesseum, and apparently even hiding under the streets of Cairo. Reptile in the Alps. The enormous tooth of an extinct marine reptile was just discovered high up in the Swiss Alps. According to the experts, this could be the largest tooth ever found belonging to this prehistoric species of Leviathan, a great monster that prowled the primordial oceans of our planet millions of years ago. It's called an ichthyosaur, and it first appeared on Earth 250 million years ago. That was in the early part of the Triassic period. It then continued to live in some form or another up until 90 million years ago. What's really interesting is that between its first appearance and its last, the ichthyosaur went through many changes. It grew to massive proportions, weighing 88 tons and reaching up to 65 feet long. But then it devolved to be no bigger than a modern dolphin. The tooth recently found in the mountains belonged to one of the bigger species, perhaps the biggest. It's known as the gigantic ichthyosaur, and it died out approximately 200 million years ago. They were unearthed between 1976 and 1990 during geological surveys, but were only recently analyzed in detail. So how in the world did the tooth get on the top of a mountain? It's actually a pretty easy question to answer. Millions of years ago, the Alps weren't 9,100 feet above sea level. They were actually below sea level, deep beneath the water surrounding the supercontinent known as Pangaea. But over time, as plate tectonics pushed the Alps up to form mountains and the sea levels changed, The tooth climbed higher and higher until it literally touched the sky. Wartime Archaeology. While digging defenses in the port city of Odessa in 2022, Ukrainian soldiers came across unexpected archaeological treasures. In the midst of the war between Ukraine and Russia, nobody could have expected Ukrainian soldiers to turn into amateur archaeologists, and yet they dug up a trove of artifacts dating back to the 3rd century BC. These soldiers are members of the Ukrainian 126th Territorial Defense, and they uncovered a large collection of amphorae. This is a fancy name for the ancient containers used by the Greeks, the Romans, and the Byzantines. The containers were usually for transporting liquids and dry goods, anything from olive oil to wine to grain. These particular containers were likely used by the Romans. What a lot of people don't know is that the port city of Odessa actually began its life as a small Roman settlement by the name of Odessus. When Ukrainian soldiers got wind that Russia was planning to strike the city, they started digging trenches. And it was in one of those trenches that these mysterious artifacts were discovered. But sadly, the discovery is unimportant in comparison to what has been lost. Ukrainian officials say over 2,000 precious works of art have been stolen. At least 127 culturally important sites in the country have been damaged. Russian shelling destroyed an entire museum on May 7th, and gold artifacts over 2,300 years old, precious items from the Scythian culture, have been looted since the war started. The sword in the sewer. Something unbelievable was recently discovered deep inside a sewer in Denmark. A pipe layer by the name of Jannik Vestergaard was conducting work on a street in the city of Aalborg when he and an engineer came across a sword from the 12th century. This was a medieval weapon, likely wielded by a warrior, lost for nearly 1,000 years, and it turned up in a sewer. The men took the sword to Kenneth Nielsen, an archaeologist with the Historical Museum of Northern Jutland. After inspecting the sword, Kenneth came to the conclusion that it had probably been lost in the 1300s, but may have been forged at least a century earlier. It was discovered in a layer of waste which has accumulated over one of the oldest layers of pavement in the city, which now is deep underground. Because of its age and the fact that it had been forged much earlier than it was lost, experts say it's very possible it had an extremely rich history even before it was discarded. It was fully complete and well saved, and the double-edged blade is still sharp. Unfortunately, we don't know who the sword belonged to, but Kenneth Nielsen thinks it was lost by a warrior during a battle. A sword was a status symbol in the Middle Ages, dragged both on and off the battlefield and constantly buried with its owner as precious grave goods. Because Denmark was plunged into chaos in the 13th century, with civil war spreading throughout the nation, there were plenty of fights happening in the streets. The owner of the sword could have been defeated. The weapon fell to the ground, and then it got pushed so deeply into the mud that nobody noticed it for centuries. Goddess buried in a field. A Palestinian farmer by the name of Abu Aid was cultivating his land when he came across an ancient statue from 4,500 years ago. This statue was broken with only its head remaining, but it was in good enough condition that archaeologists were able to identify who the face was modeled after. The statue was made in the likeness of the ancient Canaanite goddess of love and beauty, Anat. The farmer is pretty proud of his discovery, telling local news how happy he is that the Palestinian land still has archaeological value. This statue is proof that the people of the region have been there for thousands of years, since the days of the Canaanites, one of the earliest civilizations in the world. Initially thinking of selling it, Abu Aid changed his mind after an archaeologist told him the ancient relic had great archaeological value. If the name of this ancient culture sounds familiar, that's because they are mentioned in the Bible. It's in the Bible that God tells the people of Israel to drive away the Canaanites, exiling them from the Promised Land because of their wickedness and their false gods. Anat, the goddess this statue is made after, was one of those false gods mentioned in the Bible. Axe in the backyard. Angela Smith served as the Liberal Democratic MP for the area of Penistone and Stocksbridge in the United Kingdom between 2010 and 2019. Surprisingly, in 2022, she came across a Bronze Age artifact while digging in her garden. The former MP accidentally became an archaeologist that day, pulling an ancient axe caked in dirt and centuries of rust right out of her backyard. Angela shared photos of the mysterious artifact online, but we haven't heard of any real archaeologists getting involved in the case. No one knows where the axe came from or who it once belonged to. It could be anywhere from 100 to 5,000 years old. There's just no way of knowing. And believe it or not, Angela wasn't the only one to find something strange in her backyard. During the pandemic lockdowns in 2020 and 2021, people found all kinds of ancient things while digging in flower beds. A man named Peter Revel even found Neolithic arrowheads, scraps of Roman pottery, and an ancient belt hook while planting roses. Other treasures unearthed included a post-medieval belt hook in the shape of a snake found in Herefordshire, and a medieval silver coin discovered under a lawn in Stoke-on-Trent. Mysterious gravestone. A 240-year-old gravestone was just discovered on the banks of the Cuyahoga River in Ohio. The grave marker weighs over 200 pounds. It's covered in moss, and the inscription on the front was carved by hand. The gravestone reads Thaddeus J. Peck, 1711 to 1781, and has a cross carved into the top. Historians don't know who this Peck character was, but they know he died before the state of Ohio was even settled by Europeans. In fact, this gravestone is so old that the Declaration of Independence had only been penned 5 years before. When this guy died, George Washington was a general leading the Continental Army against British troops. The gravestone was discovered on April 18, 2022. A couple of fishermen heading down to their usual spot noticed the stone sticking out of the dirt. After they wiped the grime away, they realized they had come across a legit treasure. So they contacted the Historical Society, and now we have a real mystery on our hands. Seeing as Ohio wasn't established until 1803, and Cuyahoga Falls wasn't even established until 1812, what was an old pioneer doing in the Ohio wilderness in 1781? Not only that, what was a 70-year-old man doing deep in Native American territory? The average life expectancy for someone living in America was only 38 years back then. Thaddeus J. Peck lived way beyond his expectancy. He was far from his own people, and yet was seemingly important enough to be buried and given his own tombstone. The oldest rifle in Minnesota. In the 1960s, an unusual relic was discovered on the shoreline of Lower Hay Lake in Minnesota. The relic was a seemingly ordinary rifle stock, except it was very old. It had an engraved side plate in the shape of a water serpent. That kind of rifle stock hasn't been made in centuries. In fact, local historian Ray Nelson was shocked to see it, because the weapon looked just like the rifles early Europeans used to trade with Native Americans. Nelson spent many years searching for this rifle, and it appears to be the oldest rifle artifact yet found in Minnesota. The mysterious rifle has been housed in the Crow Wing County Museum ever since it was found. But it wasn't until recently that scientists did a real analysis to find out just how old the weapon is. They were able to determine the stock was made out of birchwood, which had mostly been used in Denmark, Germany, and Sweden to make rifles. After a bit more research, Ray Nelson was able to pinpoint the location of the rifle's construction as the German region of Odenwald. It's likely that the rifle was brought to America by very early German immigrants in the 18th century, who then traded the weapon to the Native Americans. Then, somehow, it got discarded at the edge of the river, where it wasn't found again for nearly 300 years. Artifacts under a Cambodian temple. Battambang is a beautiful beach city in the country of Cambodia. It's popular with backpackers, has thriving nightlife, and it's rich in culture and Buddhist history. In one of the city's many Buddhist temples, officials accidentally came across a small collection of artifacts and coins hidden beneath the floor. The temple, which is located in the Mong Brusay district, is over 300 years old. It's in pretty bad shape, and it's basically a death trap waiting to collapse. So the locals decided to build a new one. But when they began to dismantle the 17th century temple, they were shocked to find the hidden treasure. According to the provincial deputy governor, excavators found the treasure inside a mysterious hole underneath the temple. They pulled out 20 pieces of pottery, a collection of copper bells, about 24 Siamese copper coins, and 3,000 ancient silver coins. Nobody knows at this point where the artifacts came from or why they were buried underneath the temple. It looks like sometime in the last 300 years, a local monk got a hold of some loot, dug a hole, and stashed it there. Either that or the treasure had been hiding down in that hole since before the temple was even built. Artifacts at Cape Canaveral. Students from the University of Central Florida discovered artifacts in one of the most unlikely locations imaginable. Near the Banana River, at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, they uncovered prehistoric stone spear points dating back 6,000 years. What today is a highly sophisticated station dedicated to space travel was once a gathering place for Native Americans. It's a little shocking when you think about just how much things have changed in a few thousand years. Beginning in 2017, anthropology students with UCF and U.S. Air Force Space Launch Delta 45 have been doing archaeological research at the highly restricted Cape Canaveral. They discovered that there were once hundreds of Native American sites spread across the surrounding area, but most were destroyed during construction of missile ranges and military facilities. Thousands of years of history were wiped out by 50 years of rocketry. But not everything was totally erased. The students have found clusters of what appear to be feasting areas. They found several different sites filled with shells from where the Native Americans had gorged themselves on seafood. Then, when they went digging about 400 feet from the shore of the Banana River at the Penny site, they found the spear points. These spear points were used by the original hunter-gatherers of North America to take down big game. It's pretty amazing to see this kind of archaeological research being done at a space station, of all places. The Cannibal Skull Cup. People living in a cave in Somerset, England, 14,700 years ago were eating each other, but strangely enough, not for food, but as part of a ritual. Recent archaeological evidence at Gough's Cave has pointed to a sophisticated culture of cannibals who butchered their friends and ate them, according to Dr. Sylvia Bello. But the really amazing thing about these strange cannibals is that they were involved in some of the earliest funerary practices of our species. And this is where the Cannibal Skull Cup artifacts come into play. These are some of the most disturbing artifacts ever found in a cave anywhere. Of course, there were many prehistoric human remains found inside of Gough's Cave, almost all of them showing clear signs of bite and cut marks. The most remarkable thing they did was craft dishes from the bones of people they consumed. 3 skull artifacts were discovered that had been carefully molded into drinking cups and bowls. While this might sound horrific now, making containers like this has been found from the Vikings to the Scythians. Dr. Bello reported that there was also a pattern of zigzag marks carved into bones to make art. There was plenty of meat available, so it seems like this practice was a clear choice. But aside from the disturbing bone bowls and cups, archaeologists also found objects crafted from ivory, reindeer antlers, and the bones of small mammals. The cave's most famous resident was the Cheddar Man, a near-complete skeleton from around 10,000 years ago. Mexican tomb artifacts. At the Monte Alban archaeological site in southern Mexico, researchers found more than 400 valuable artifacts hidden inside of a secret tomb. This was back in 1932, when the famous archaeologist Alfonso Caso stumbled upon what would come to be known as the Treasure of Monte Alban, inside Tomb 7 of the Zapotec site. The amazing artifacts contained within the tomb include relics made of jaguar bones, rock crystal, gold, and even ultra-rare jade. According to the Tomb 7 exhibition curator Nelly Robles, the artifacts were part of an ossuary and not a tomb designed for a certain person. Plus, both Zapotec and the later Mixtec people had use of the tomb, with Mixtec people leaving behind jewels and human remains after the Zapotecs. Both cultures believed that the Mesoamerican god of death and the underworld, Mictlantecutli, and the god of rebirth, Xipetotec, presided over the tomb and kept the treasures safe. The cursed amethyst. The cursed amethyst, also sometimes known as the blasted amethyst, is currently locked up very far from human eyes alongside other precious stones such as the rare Martian meteorite and the Medusa emerald, one of the largest uncut emeralds ever found. The cursed amethyst gets its name from its reputation. The gem was originally stolen during the Indian Mutiny of 1857 from the Temple of Indra in India. And ever since, it has been allegedly causing its owners despair and horror. The stone is currently sitting inside the vault of the Natural History Museum in London. It was locked away by its previous owner inside of a bank safe, where it stayed for over 3 years following his death before ultimately being transferred to the museum. But the story of the amethyst goes back much further. It first arrived in England thanks to a cavalryman named Colonel W. Ferris, the guy who stole it from the temple in 1857. After arriving back in England, the colonel apparently suffered great misfortune. Then, so did his son, who inherited the amethyst. And then, so did the friend that the colonel's son gave the stone to. Basically, this amethyst is a hot potato of death.
To this day, nobody is entirely sure where the jewel came from in the first place. Nobody in the scientific community believes that the curse is real, and it's unlikely that anyone will ever take it out of its hiding place inside the museum vault. Even if you don't believe in curses, the coincidences surrounding those who own the jewel and the misfortune that befell them is hard to ignore. Lead chalice. Archaeologists have recently found the fragments of a lead cup or a chalice, lightly carved with symbols that date back to early Christianity. This is an extremely mysterious artifact, which was found at the site of Vindolanda, an old Roman military fort near Hadrian's Wall in the north of England. 14 fragments in total were found underneath the remains of a Christian church from the 6th century, and according to Dr. David Petz from the Department of Archaeology at Durham University, it is an extremely exciting discovery that comes from one of the most poorly understood periods in all of British history. This singular artifact has created a direct connection between the earliest Christian churches in Britain and the religion's development during the medieval period. The curious marks on the cup are etched on both the inside and the outside, but they are difficult to see without the aid of specialized photographic equipment. It took a lot of work to properly reveal the symbols, which ended up being depictions of ships, crosses, angels, Latin and Greek letters, and what even appear to be members of a congregation. While Vindolanda has had its share of unique firsts, the fact that this chalice survived the post-Roman landscape is significant. Ancient Maya alien artifacts. Last year, rumors spread of strange objects allegedly taken from Maya excavation sites. There were figurines and carvings of Maya warriors sacrificing victims, along with other figures who look very much like aliens. A publication in October 2020 reported that the figurines were found when a rock wall of a cave was demolished with a bulldozer. Then artifacts appeared with figures wearing pre-Columbian motifs, domed heads, and dark oval eyes. They are strangely similar to extraterrestrial representations found in movies. There is not only one alien artifact that has been uncovered from the ancient kingdom of the Maya. There are many, from statues depicting alien beings to strange carvings of what appear to be spaceships and star maps. Though the truth of where the artifacts come from, or how the Maya could have developed the idea on their own, is a total mystery. Since these findings spread like wildfire, Adrián Montemayor, head of information for the National Fund for the Promotion of Tourism, the government institution that supervises the work, joked about the alleged finding in a thread on Twitter on October 11th. We have not found figures of aliens in the archaeological excavations of the hashtag Tren Maya, unfortunately. He said, "I have to clarify that these are contemporary pieces that have no relationship whatsoever with the Mayan periods. They include Mexican symbols from Peru and the United Kingdom. They are made of current materials and have aliens that look like children's figurines." Nevertheless, social media in the Hispanic world is going crazy, with many believing that the government is just trying to hide them from the public. Artifact of the Great Pyramid. When researchers went in to survey the Great Pyramid of Giza, British engineer Wayneman Dixon took 3 artifacts from the Queen's Chamber: a piece of cedar, a ball, and a hook, which are now known as the Dixon artifacts. However, one of the artifacts went missing. Over 70 years later, it was discovered in a rather unusual place. A researcher was going through some objects at the University of Aberdeen Museum in Scotland when she found a small tin box that looked out of place. Inside was a wooden fragment about 5 inches long. It was the long-lost piece of cedar. It was placed in the Queen's Chamber when the structure was built and was probably part of a tool used to build the pyramid. Apparently, the fragment and a bronze hook believed to have been used during the construction were donated to the University of Aberdeen sometime in the early 1900s, but the fragment of wood disappeared. Someone had accidentally put it into a cigar box and then shoved it in with other miscellaneous artifacts in the university's Asia collection. The only reason it was discovered is thanks to the Egyptian flag on the cover. Following its discovery, modern carbon dating tests were done to the wood fragment. The results showed that the wood dated back as far as 3,341 BC, which was many years before the construction of the pyramid. This has led researchers to speculate that whatever the wood had been a part of, it was left behind by the earliest builders at the famous site, though even today, nobody knows what kind of tool or instrument the wood fragments came from. Strange Paleolithic bird figurine. A rather peculiar artifact was recently pulled out of a garbage heap. Archaeologists found a Paleolithic bird figure that may just be the oldest three-dimensional Chinese artwork on the planet. Archaeologists are even saying that the existence of this tiny bird shows that the people of China began to make their own artwork independently from other civilizations of the ancient world, somewhere around 13,500 years ago. The bird was first found in the Henan province of China when a pile of trash was being excavated. The trash actually came from a well that was dug by construction crews in 1958. The pile of dirt sat there until 2005, when archaeologists decided it would be a good idea to comb through what the construction crews had left behind. And that was when they found the small Paleolithic bird figurine, carved expertly out of a blackened bone. There were other artifacts in the pile as well, things like pottery shards and stone tools. However, the bird has definitely gotten everyone's attention. It actually pushes the origin of avian art in Chinese history back 8,500 years. According to Luc Doyon from the University of Montreal, archaeologists were struck by the technological feat of the bird and its beauty. Some anthropologists also noted that when a race of people move beyond the basic needs of survival, they begin to create art. This bird could signify the exact time that human beings in China became comfortable enough to stop foraging for food and began making three-dimensional art. It's very interesting to see at which point different cultures in different parts of the world began making sculptures. Sacrificial altar. The colossal jaguar sculpture currently sitting at the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City was once used as a vessel for hearts that were torn straight out of the chests of sacrificial victims. This intimidating artifact is known as a guajicali, and it was originally carved from a large piece of volcanic rock. It's one of the most striking artifacts ever found, in the likeness of a growling jaguar with its fangs bared and its nostrils wide open. The animal looks as if it's about to pounce on an unsuspecting victim. A guajicali is a type of altar that would have been found at almost every Aztec shrine hundreds of years ago, and these were either in the form of a jaguar or an eagle. In the center of it is a bowl that was used as a vessel in which the high priest would place the heart of the sacrificed victim before burning it as an offering to the Aztec gods. In many Mesoamerican civilizations, the heart was believed to be the physical soul of a human or animal, and so the ritual was a way that the gods could be nourished with the soul of a life form. And considering that the jaguar was an animal with great symbolic importance within the Aztecs' cosmovision, it makes sense that many of these altars were crafted in their likeness. This particular jaguar sculpture was found sometime in the 19th century, and it's believed that it was used primarily in sacrifices involving enemy warriors caught in battle. Bronze Age artifacts. The world's most unlikely archaeologist has made one of the most amazing discoveries in recent memory. The archaeologist's name is Monty, and he is a dog. While out for a walk in a small Czech village, Monty began digging in a field and miraculously came upon a buried cache of amazing Bronze Age artifacts. The dog helped find 13 sickles, 3 axes, 2 spear points, and a large number of bracelets. All of these artifacts are at least 3,000 years old, and according to Smithsonian Magazine, the owner of the dog actually got a small reward of about $360 for turning the artifacts over to the authorities. Considering that so many of the artifacts were found in a single place, the site was most likely used as some sort of sacrifice pit 3 millennia ago. But what surprised archaeologists the most was the incredible shape in which the artifacts were found. Because normally, the ancient cultures that lived in the area would only bury fragments or even melted fragments of weapons, but all of these artifacts were in perfect condition, making their value even greater. As for where these artifacts came from, archaeologists say they are from the Urnfield period of the late European Bronze Age. The Urnfield period was the time when communities began to cremate their dead and bury them in ceremonial urns. Sunken Aboriginal tools. 270 Aboriginal artifacts have just been found at 2 different archaeological sites underwater, both of them located off the northwest coast of Australia. These amazing artifacts are about 7,000 years old. They are stone tools which were used by the original people who lived in Australia before Europeans ever landed on the continent. But to understand the incredible significance of this discovery, we first need to take a look back in history. You see, when the Ice Age ended 12,000 years ago, and the glaciers melted and the sea levels rose, at least 30% of the habitable land in Australia was submerged. And as you can imagine, a lot of people were living on that 30% of land. After all, this was coastal land, and there is almost always a community near the coast. It's unclear if the coastal people were decimated by catastrophic flooding, but one thing is for sure, they left behind artifacts and remnants of their culture. Jonathan Benjamin, a professional archaeologist from Flinders University, recently told Business Insider that these artifacts have redrawn the map of what archaeology can do in Australia. No longer are archaeologists restricted to only digging on land or in the shallow water. And even as we speak, Jonathan's team is working hard to dive under the surface of the ocean and find more artifacts and to decode and understand the Aboriginal tools that have already been retrieved. Soon, we will have a much clearer idea of the people who once inhabited the land down under. Do you have any theories curious about these mysterious artifacts? If so, let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!